Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness, and Donovon Jenson is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks.
Hey.
Great. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about happiness and what that means. How do we define happiness? Great starting point. So, Donovan, would you like to share about your thoughts of what you define as happiness?
Sure. So I think there's a couple layers that go into happiness, which just sounds wild because it should be this like super simple thing, but I think a lot of people define it differently. So the first thing I want to touch on is I think it's very common for people to define happiness as the actual emotional feeling of happiness. That's not where I put it, but that's like a very common thing is like, I'm happy when I feel happy, right? Like that's what happiness is.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's something more like joy. To me, happiness is a lot more encompassing of a thing than just the simple like one-time feeling. The reason that I bring this up to start with is because there was a time in the past where I thought that happiness was just this, emotional high.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I would go look for or try to get all the time. And now I know that feeling happy in that way and an emotional high all the time isn't really realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like we're going to have bad days, bad things will happen, et cetera, et cetera. So my definition has over the years kind of expanded now to be something closer to like general well-being, right? So happiness to me has basically these components of feelings, right? Like emotions, as well as purpose and something to do with kind of the physical feelings that I have. So to me, happiness is, there are a couple different things. This is going to be a weird definition of happiness that probably no one has heard of, but there's states that you can experience the world in, right? So you can either feel things through your body, have emotions or thoughts. And then however you evaluate those states, whatever you focus on and how you evaluate it and how desirable that thing is.
Mm-hmm.
So basically like your relationship to these states,
Mm-hmm.
that's how I define happiness. So, or at least that's how I like live my life to try to increase happiness, which is to say that for any given moment, I'm trying to see how these states are composed, right? Like whatever I'm feeling in my body or in my emotions or meaning or like thoughts I put in under meaning, like what's the point of whatever I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
and then tie my own relationship to that. So one like super clear example is exercise, right? Like exercise at its core doesn't really feel good like in my body.
Yeah, right.
I can get put a frame around it,
Mm-hmm.
make the relationship one that I'm like, yeah, it doesn't feel good, right? But like the overall evaluation is that it's a positive and desirable state.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that's probably like a way more complex and wild than normal definition of happiness, but for me, that's the way that I can encompass everything and put it into one bucket and then kind of be like, is this thing contributing to my happiness or not? And by that, I mean, is it improving one of these states or improving my relationship to these states, my evaluations of these states? So that's what I look for to define happiness. And then that's what I try to maximize for.
Okay. Yeah, I got it. So what I'm hearing is happiness is more associated with like a general well-being, and there's things and activities we can do to kind of increase that overall well-being versus moments of joy is, that could be more situational.
Yeah, definitely. I try to think about it because to me, in my mind, and this is just for me, my own definition is just like, okay, I should be able to figure out like what's going to make me the happiest. And if I think about that in terms of just these emotional moments, those are, I mean, they're not totally random, right? They're not random, but like to expect them to always be at a high doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So for me, defining happiness by just the emotional moments of joy isn't encompassing enough, but like you could switch out my definition of happiness with well-being probably, and more people would get closer to that. But I also feel like a lot of the people I've run into think of happiness as greater than just the emotional moments.
No, I would agree with that, absolutely. And actually, I'm really glad that you kind of made the distinction of joy versus happiness. And that was an interesting thing because a year and a half ago, actually, it was the day that I had my first date with my partner. We had an amazing first date. I don't say this ever. I don't necessarily believe in like love at first sight, but it was like love at first conversation. I had never felt like in love on a first date, and that's was my experience. And then afterwards, it was just a coffee date. And then afterwards, I walked into Safeway on my own just to do some grocery shopping because the Safeway was right next door to the cafe. And this woman, like this random stranger, comes up to me and asks me, can I ask you a question? And I'm always like, this could be weird. Maybe she's going to try to sell me something. I don't know. She's like, I'm doing like some research. Can you tell me what the difference is between happiness and joy? And I was like, oh, you asked the right person because I have so many thoughts about this. And it's somewhat similar, I guess, to how you would define it. I think joy is kind of like more momentary and like situation based, circumstantial, I guess. Like, when you get a raise, they're like really excited, or, when a girl says yes to a date, or like those are, yeah, so excited, so happy and joyful, really. But, like those moments will pass and we'll just go back to our every day-to-day thing. But then, to sustain that day-to-day, you could be like, oh, life is a drag, boo, this sucks, or with that like negative mindset, where you can go through life with a more positive, happy mindset, which does take work. It's kind of, I view it as more of like a way of being that you can, it's not necessarily like an automatic thing. Maybe you have to do things like exercise or eating healthier or spending time with friends, having quality connection and authentic relationships to feel that, to develop that. It's not just handed to you. Maybe when you're a child, though. Children are like pure joy, but I think over time, as we get older and more cynical, it kind of fades away because we let certain situations from the past kind of like hold us back or get to us. So we're not as pure joy as children are. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, my thought going on what you just said is, it seems like to me, little kids, when they run around, they're just doing whatever they're doing, and they don't have all this other baggage and nonsense and
They don't have all the baggage
stuff going on.
Right.
But yeah, as we get older, I think, a clear example to me, and I think this is an example in a bunch of books, but like road rage, like when I'm driving around and someone cuts me off, if I just take 1 second to get out of that frame, right? Like if I'm not like, oh, I just got cut off, like blah, 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 blah,
Right.
and think about what it actually was, doesn't really change my day. Nothing really happened. So to me, that's kind of like the distinction. And I guess kids aren't really driving, so that's not a great comparison. But the difference is like just being in the moment of like, this thing happened and I'm still here and today's fine and whatever.
Right.
As opposed to all these, I guess, habits and triggers that like build up. And then it's like, this happened, so now I'm mad because this shouldn't happen. It's like, what? Wait, what?
Well, that's the reality of that's the thing that happened. Yeah, that makes me think of like this one book. I don't know if I mentioned to you, Loving What Is, and it's based on a lot of personal development Buddhist principles of just loving and accepting whatever the situation is. Like if you get cut off in traffic, yeah, you can be upset about it and like let it ruin your day and just be grumble through your work day. And then when you get home, affect your relationship. And then your partner says, oh, could you take out the trash? And then you get really upset because you got cut off of the trash. And it just builds. You can let it destroy the rest of your day, or you can actually see that moment you got cut off is the thing that happens. And that's the reality of the situation. And it's like, you can resist it and be upset about it, but all that happened is you got caught off. And when you accept that, that's the situation. that sometimes happens. I'm sure person wasn't intentionally trying to cut you off. Or maybe he was. Who knows? Maybe he is an a-hole. We don't know, but it's just like, that's the reality of the situation. There's people that do that, and you can let that affect you and be upset and let that person win at upsetting you. Or you could just be like, hey, it happens. I'm still alive. I didn't get in a car accident. Thank goodness. Yeah. So yeah, just accepting whatever the situation, which is hard. It's a practice in itself. Yeah.
Well, that goes back to kind of how I've defined happiness, right? Which is that those types of things, those types of situations, to me, it's all about like figuring out and training habits of getting the right frames on those. To me, that's like, okay, that's how you get the most happiness, right? Like, if I can get my brain in a place where that happens and I don't have to spend 20 minutes just mad about nothing, something completely out of my control that doesn't affect my day that much.
Right.
If I can grab all those moments from like every different part of the day and get the right frames on them, then to me, that's top-notch happiness. That's when I'm going to be the most happy, because it takes all of these external events and allows me to get my like a positive frame around them, which I'm going to put some type of frame on every experience anyway, right? So like if I can control that piece, then the feelings, the whole happiness part just like comes out a lot better.
Yeah. And it takes training really of yourself to, I think all human beings, it's kind of just what it is to be human, is to be reactive and triggered by little things that will upset. It's natural, but it's just, the more you catch it and notice it and be like, okay, I'm being reactive, and the reality of the situation is this is what it is. We can train ourselves to reduce, like maybe instead where it would ruin your whole day, maybe it only you're upset for an hour. And then maybe if you focus more, maybe you minimize it down to 5 minutes. And then maybe if you get really good, you could just do it within seconds of being like, oh, there it is again. let's reverse it and move forward.
Yeah, I don't know if you have had this experience, but that made me think of most of the time, I feel like thoughts just show up, right? These thoughts that just are in my head. Yeah. So we'll keep using this car example, but like if I get cut off immediately,
right?
Me doing anything, immediately there's this thought of like, oh, this is cuss words and other stuff, and like,
listen, yeah.
And then sometimes that train just keeps going, and then other times I see it, like some other part of me is like, hey, wait a minute, what is this thought and where am I going? And then I can, direct it back. But it's really interesting to me as just a part of experience that sometimes it's still thinking, but it's like autopilot, let's go down this track, versus like, hey, wait a minute, where does this track lead? Let's course correct over here. I don't know if that resonates at all.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I can course correct, but sometimes it's like really, really hard. And I'm like, I know what I need to do, but it's like, ooh. And actually a good example was I got for Valentine's, which is just this past Friday. I got upset with my boyfriend because I was driving from Sacramento to San Francisco, and I texted him, do you want me to pick you up at your office and then we could go home, or do you want me to meet you at home? And so I didn't know, and so he didn't respond. So I'm calling on the drive and it just goes straight to voicemail. So I'm assuming his phone is dead, and I'm getting really frustrated because it's just like, charge your phone already. It's been 2 hours. And then I'm calling his work and I couldn't get a hold of anyone. Then I'm dealing with traffic and parking, and it was just the drive in itself. It was like a built up frustration. And then I still haven't heard from him. I get to the city and I haven't heard from him yet. And I'm really frustrated and annoyed. And a little before 6, so he's usually still at work. So I'm just going to go to his work and see if he's there. And then I get there and he's not. And the coworkers told me that he's already left 20 minutes ago. So I was like, okay, he must be home. And I texted him. I'm like, hey, I was just at your work. call me back. So I know that to make sure you're still at home. And then he calls me back a few minutes later. He was like, I just got home. Sorry, my phone died. And I was like, well, you should have figured that out. Like, I was on my way. I was like, you should have gotten that figured out. Ask for a charger from someone at work because you knew I was on my way. My tone was obviously very reactive. You know, you didn't understand like the full context of the whole drive of the built up frustration. And so when I talked to him, I was very reactive and kind of like, and he was like, well, you know, you're going to be in that tone, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, so he was kind of like reacting to my reaction. And so, you know, it was just like, I'm driving to his place and I am really like, okay, I know it's like it's not like a huge deal that I just stop by his office for a few minutes. It's not a big deal. He's only a mile from his office. So it's not like a huge out of the way thing. It's just what it is. His phone died. Can't control that. Just be okay with it. And I'm driving there and I'm still upset. And I'm like, he should have known, like all of that. So I park and then I walk over to his apartment building and I was like, okay, I'm going to try to be calm. We had reservations for a French restaurant for Valentine's Day. So I would like to enjoy that. So I was like, I got to get out of this reaction as ASAP. Otherwise it's going to ruin our evening and I don't want it to ruin our evening. And I know I'm reacting over this silly, stupid thing. And so I'm trying to work on it as I'm walking down to the apartment. And I knew he tends to be reactive when I get reactive. And I was like, oh, he's going to be reactive and I'm going to be reactive and it's going to escalate and then it could just ruin the whole evening. But when I get there, he's standing at the door with like a Valentine's heart of chocolates. I was like, and like it diffused it like that. The fact that he could get out of his reaction, even though he said he had like a bad day too, so he was reactive too. And I was just like, okay, I'm really glad that everything is forgiven. It really was a silly thing. And it's not even for the chocolates, the fact that he could get out of reaction before that I could get out of reaction. So we didn't end up fighting that evening. And he did say after I hung up the phone with him, he was upset because of my tone that he wanted to throw the box of chocolates away. I can understand that, but he was like, I didn't because I know I was reacting and I decided to go another way. And I was like, I'm glad you did that because that could have gone a different way for our Valentine's. So yeah, that's my story.
First, I'm glad that things went well.
Yeah.
But it makes such a big difference to be able to identify those points. Kind of what you're just laying out, where there's all these different points where we have the opportunity to make a decision or try to think about things differently or try to do something, right? Like, I don't know, I feel like in the past, not in the relationship I'm in now, but in the past, I was in a relationship where we couldn't identify those things even. Like, we had no idea what was happening. Like, all of a sudden, we would just be in a huge fight.
Yeah.
And try to walk it back, be like, nope, no idea. I don't know what's happened. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
We're both just got super mad at each other. I guess like this can't be a thing. Right. But with a couple more tools, we probably could have walked back and seen like, okay, there's this point. Like you were saying, you had the whole context of your entire drive up. You have the context of traffic, of trying to call many, many times. You have the full story of all this stuff building up.
Right.
And you know all the pieces that went into building those emotions. Whereas, like you said, your significant other did not have that information.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
So then getting kind of the tone you were talking about from what seems like nowhere, it's not, you have the whole story, but what seems like nowhere is just like, wait, what's going on? Why, I think it's super nice now to be in a place where I can, and it sounds like you can, see different points in how interactions shape up, because all those little pieces add up to, like you're saying, either a nice night out or a huge fight. And it goes back to what I was talking about when defining happiness. That's getting all of those little evaluations in the right direction adds up, not just in terms of personal happiness, but all relationships and all the other stuff that needs to get done and bleeds out into everything else.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It makes a really difference because, it's one thing to not be happy on an individual level and but everyone has to interact with people at some point in their life. It's going to happen. So yeah, you could, if you're not proactively searching for ways to improve your happiness, it is going to impact your relationships, whether it's your friends or your coworkers or just like people you receive like a delivery order from if they're late. Just like something simple like that. It's, you can choose to, be understanding of, you have no idea what they've been through, their experience. And that's something that kind of helps me too, being like, okay, I don't know, for my boyfriend, I don't know what bad thing that happened that kind of messed up his day. So he wasn't in a great mood too. And, I didn't get the context of that. And, when people are late and we don't know if that's a consistent thing or, maybe they were dealing with something heavy. Yeah.
Yeah. While you were talking about it, I was just thinking too, like in terms of happiness, that seems like there's two pieces of it, which is to say that like there's us as individuals.
Yeah.
And the stuff that we take in, and then like how we digest that and how we choose to act based on like what's going on around us.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, so I guess, so it's us projecting out into the world things.
Mm-hmm.
And then also that influences the environment around us to make things either easier or harder. And this sounds really, okay, let me take it to something tangible. When you were talking about that story, I thought it was interesting that you were saying that he was able to kind of break his pattern.
Yeah.
Right? And then that made it super easy for you to break it.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? I guess the thing that's interesting to me is this huge interplay of factors. So had he not done that, you still could have broken your pattern, but it would have been significantly harder.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at is like the environments and the kinds of people you put yourself in makes a big difference. That's the point I'm trying to get out of whatever I'm saying.
No, I get it. It does, if the people around you are not recognizing and being aware of their own reactions and ability to get out of it. We've done a lot of, both of us have done work in exploring, being able to know when we're in reaction emotional mode versus when we can be reasonable and logical. And we know we can't have like productive dialogue and conversations to benefit the relationship when we're both really reactive. So we have a thing where, both we have to calm down first and be in a place of listening and understanding. And we try not to spew daggers at it, but things inevitably happen. My plan was, as I was walking down, before I saw the box of chocolates, my plan was, okay, I'm going to go into the apartment. I'm going to just like lay down for like 5 minutes, calm down, and then I think I should be okay. Yeah, that was my plan. But I think with him being prepared, getting out of his reaction, that like disappeared it really. Yeah.
That's the strategy that I have. That's the only one that ever works.
Well, I have another thought on what kinds of things can contribute to your sense of well-being and happiness is something that I've noticed. I don't remember if I talked about this before, but one thing that I really notice that really contributes to my overall well-being and happiness is authentic connection. That really makes a difference for me. And even though when I'm feeling low and sad, I don't necessarily want to talk to people. I just like don't want to bring anyone else down sometimes. But I've noticed me interacting with someone or sharing like what I'm dealing with helps me get out of it quicker. So that's something I've trained myself to do, even though I don't want to necessarily, I don't feel like talking to people. I know just authentically connecting makes a big difference. And the more of that I have, the more people I interact with, people that I trust, obviously, and I feel connected that I can really open up to and be vulnerable with. That gives me like a sense of happiness, almost like a sense of aliveness, really. Yeah.
What would you say the difference is, or maybe the baseline for an authentic connection is, right, as opposed to some other form of connection?
Right. I mean, I'm not saying like the other type of connection is bad or it won't help, but it just, I think, just the like, hey, how are you? I'm fine. I'm good. What I would like to see is like if someone wasn't feeling fine to actually admit it, being like, no, you know what? I'm actually having a terrible day and I could really use a friend to listen to me right now. And this is what I've been dealing with. it's an authentic conversation. Just instead of like just pretending like everything is fine and dandy. And I think too many people, and sometimes I still do it. It's so automatic. The question, how are you? People just want to automatically say good or fine. And that's just like what we're trained to do. No, let's break free of that and realize that, not everyone can be fine and good at every single moment in their life. So it's just catching those moments when we're not and reaching out. Yeah.
I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, where it's just not realistic to think that we're going to be on an emotional high all the time.
Right.
Like some days are going to be bad
Mm-hmm.
or harder.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like authentic connection for you is basically a conversation or like talking to someone that you feel comfortable enough with to really let them know how you're doing completely, not just a surface level, yeah, I'm doing all right, which, like you're saying, I think that's super, super common. I don't even know the last time I asked someone how they were, where they didn't just say good or
Right.
fine or great.
Right. Or great. Yeah.
Even in instances where I know
Mm-hmm.
that's not true,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there have been times where and both ways, but times where I've tried to reach out to people that I know are having some sort of a rough time. It's just really interesting to me that there's, I guess, some sort of social stigma or some sort of like, I guess that's what it would be, but where people don't really feel comfortable talking at that level very often.
Right.
I don't know. It seems like that's, like you were saying, something critically important. Like if you don't have an outlet for your emotions or for your
Mm-hmm.
just events and problems and stuff, then it's gonna weigh you down.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's going to just impact everything, every relationships, maybe your work performance, just everything. I feel like society is just, I don't know, maybe it's the wanting to avoid like looking weak or, looking bad or all of that. And have you seen the Brene Brown talk on vulnerability?
Mm-hmm.
TED Talk, that's a really good TED Talk. And she was talking about how that actually leads to that sense of connection when you're willing. It takes something. It's not actually weak to be vulnerable. It actually takes like a ridiculous amount of courage to like be vulnerable, because it is stepping outside of your comfort zone and putting yourself at risk to be judged or whatever. But at the same time, that being vulnerable allows others to really see you for you, and you can see others for who they are and really just be real about life and what you're dealing with. So you realize, hey, maybe I'm not alone in dealing with whatever this situation is. Yeah.
I guess that's probably what part of it is some amount of fear around being vulnerable with people.
Yeah.
Because it requires you to show something, like you were saying, like weakness,
Mm-hmm.
as well as share something that's very private and I don't know what word to use besides like vulnerable again.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have the right person, like you were talking about with authentic connection, like if you don't have someone that you're comfortable and feel confident that they're going to give you the type of support that you need,
Mm-hmm.
then it's terrifying. Like I can't imagine sharing something that I feel very scared and vulnerable about with someone who, instead of accepting it or basically feeding off of it or whatever, shuts it down.
Yeah.
That's got to be like, that probably only has to happen once or twice before you don't really want to share.
Right.
And I would guess that most people have had some sort of experience like that. So that's probably why
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people, or at least partially why a lot of people are scared to really authentically share, as well as feeling like you're bringing other people down, feeling like if you don't know or feel very confident about what the reaction of the other person is going to be, and that it's going to be supportive and open and understanding, then I can't imagine wanting to share.
Right. No, absolutely. And yeah, it does take something to just be vulnerable, and that's kind of like the risk is also being okay with, if it kind of takes us back to accepting or loving whatever it is, the situation. You have no idea how it's going to go. If you share and be vulnerable, it could go really bad, or it could open up amazing connection with that person. But the situation, if it goes really bad, you could be upset by it and then let it stop you from opening up and just shut you down from that connection with anyone moving forward. Or you could just be like, this is what the situation is. And, you know, maybe this person isn't ready to really process everything that I shared, but, you know, maybe there's other people that are. It doesn't have to like let you determine how the rest of your life is going to go.
I guess that's what makes it twice as hard, right? Is because
Right.
you're already having a bad time.
Right.
Okay? And
Yeah.
then someone doesn't accept it and shuts it down. Then not only are you left dealing with what you started with, you're
Right.
also dealing with like whatever shutdown or negativity, whatever else.
Right.
So that makes sense to me. It's just kind of sad. Like I would guess that not like a very substantial number of people don't have someone
Mm-hmm.
or multiple people, or at least one person that like they feel like they could
Mm-hmm.
open up to in that way.
Yeah.
My life has changed a lot in the last few years, but I know probably like 5 years ago or so, like I don't know there's anyone that I felt that way about. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sure, there were people that I could talk to and I could talk to about things, but to actually like open up completely, it's almost definitely partially my own feelings and not necessarily the people I knew, but I know for sure there was like a long period of time where I was in that boat, and it definitely has, tying it all the way back, like a big impact on happiness, because there's a lot we can do on our own, but
Yeah.
it is so much easier when you have the right people in your corner, and you trust them, because you might already have the right people but not be willing to open up. But
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
that covers, all the stuff that I want to talk about. Anything else that you want to touch on?
No, I think, you know, we got a good like overview of happiness, but also distinguishing it from joy, as well as, you know, what creates happiness in the long term. So, yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.